Καλησπέρα σας και πάλι, καλοί φίλοι τηλεθεατές. Good evening to you. We have with us tonight Catherine West, candidate for Hornsey and Wood Green.
Καλησπέρα.
Καλησπέρα, you surprised me. Τι κάνεις, how are you?
Καλό.
Oh my God. Shall we carry on in Greek?
No, please, English.
No, please, English, okay. English, please. Okay. All right. You are, you know, for Hornsey and Wood Green.
Yes.
The others, you know, you gonna fight with is Helen Spivivan. It's a Christian Alliance,
Yes.
I think, and Liberal Democrat Don Barnes, and it's Son Hall, Green Party,
Yes.
and we have Emma Lynn, Conservative.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And you keep is Ruth Price.
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to share the votes,
So
I suppose. You know,
it's a busy time.
it's a busy time. Okay.
And
Can we start with just a little bit of biography? I mean,
yes. Yeah.
where did you born? You born in London? Or?
No.
No, you born in Australia.
Funnily enough, I was
Yes.
born in the state of Victoria in Australia.
Australia, yes.
And as you know, there's a very big Greek-speaking population in Melbourne.
Mhm.
So I grew up with a lot of Greek speakers,
There. Yeah.
even though I grew up in Sydney actually. I was born in Victoria but grew up in Sydney. And I studied languages at university, and I actually lived in China for a year as well. So I've done a lot of different things. But in the 1990s, I worked with the Kosovan refugees here in London, and it was my first introduction to, you know, North London. I was working with many people in Tottenham, and David Lammy invited me to work for him as a caseworker. And after that I got onto the local authority, the local council, which was Islington Council, and that's how I got to know Jeremy Corbyn, who of course was the Member of Parliament when I was the council leader. And eventually I went for the seat in Hornsey and Wood Green for the Labour Party and was selected. And then I was elected in 2015, so I've been an MP for 2 years.
2 years. Okay, during your campaign these days, I mean, it's only a few days left now.
That's right.
And you meet, I suppose, so many people, and you identify some problems, you know, and some, you know, difficulties they face. What are they, and what are you going to do to make their lives easier?
Well, top issue is the Tories' hard Brexit, because that could have a terrible effect on our economy. And it's the people who are in the lowest economic group who will suffer, because we know if the economy crashes, it's the poor and the middle class who suffer. And that's my number one concern, because this has been a terrible year with the surprise result to leave the European Union. Very disruptive, plunging in the sterling, and a real impact on all industries. Many of my constituents will lose their jobs potentially. This is a very worrying scenario. That's why in Parliament I formed the EU-UK grouping, which looks at each sector, agriculture, the environment, workers' rights, the city, all of those different sectors, so that we can address what are the issues within that sector that we need to ask as MPs of the government. And that's been a very successful group. We've been working across party with the Green Member of Parliament, with the SNP, Scottish National Party, with one of the Liberal Democrats, Lord Wallace, in the Lords. So we're trying to form a group which is asking a lot of questions and making sure that we're not heading straight towards an extreme Brexit, because I think that would be a very negative development.
Yeah.
The other issue, of course, is austerity. We've had 7 years of cuts from the Tory government. The national debt is still very high, and we still have a lot of problems with the public finances. However, despite all the cutbacks, we're still not where we should be in terms of the public finances, despite cutting the NHS back severely, despite the lack of investment in social housing, despite the cutbacks in our schools and our education, our nurseries, our early years centres. We're still experiencing a lot of strain, stress, difficulty for people here in Hornsey and Wood Green.
In our community, I suppose, our Greeks and Greek Cypriots,
Yes.
they're facing a big problem with Brexit as
Of
well,
course.
because, some of them, there are three categories.
That's right.
The ones they came here, they have, they have the British citizenship. The ones they came and they gain the, to to be able to stay.
Yes.
And the ones they just came the last
That's
couple
right.
of years,
Yes.
who they are even in worst position. What can you say to them, and how you can secure that they're not going to be in a difficult situation?
Sure. Well, on day one of a Labour government, and bear in mind, if the polls continue to go in the direction they're going, we could have a Labour government next Friday, in 1 week today. If we have a Labour government, one of the first announcements will be that all European nationals will have the right to remain in the UK. And actually, even Leave voters believe that this is the fair thing to do, because we've been relying on a number of EU citizens to do work in the NHS, to work very hard in agriculture, to do our food production, to work in the hospitality sector, to help us with our scientific research, to be architects, to be designers, to work on construction sites, to work in our security services. We have a number of different ways in which EU citizens have been very proactive, and it's only fair that on day one they should have their right to remain. And of course, other questions. I've had a number of EU citizens ask me what happens to my particular paperwork. I'm worried about my paperwork which I put into the Home Office. There's a number of different things which Labour could resolve overnight if people vote Labour next Thursday, so that we can have that clarity on the status of EU nationals. The other thing, of course, is the meaningful vote. We are very in favour of a vote before the European Parliament has a vote, which would give us time to gather together a good set of negotiating arrangements. And I believe Sir Keir Starmer and Emily Thornberry, who are the two Labour negotiators, would be much better and much more able to get a good deal with Europeans compared to Boris Johnson and Liam Fox, who have an inbuilt antipathy towards Europe. We know that Mrs May has had her megaphone out and is shouting across the channel at the Europeans. This is no way to begin a negotiation. We know that she stood outside Downing Street and accused the Europeans of meddling in this general election. These sorts of appeals basically to UKIP for votes is a very uncomfortable position for a government to be in. And I think by having a Labour government, because don't forget Labour never wanted the referendum last year, it was never in our manifesto in 2015. We have clean hands on this. We would be best placed to begin the negotiations with a clear way, with good relationships in Europe. We know that when the party leader, Mr Corbyn, and Keir Starmer and Emily went to Europe and met with the Party of European Socialists, they got on very well. They understand where Jeremy's coming from, being old Labour. And I believe that there's a good deal of sympathy there between the parties, and I think that's really what we need to do, is to get the negotiations off to a fresh start with a fresh negotiating team. And I hope the British people will give us that opportunity next Thursday, so that we can start again to build that partnership with Europe. It will be different because we can't ignore the referendum, but equally we don't have to have UKIP from behind telling us what to do, which is really how the relationship has developed with the Tories. They're very reliant on votes from UKIP, whereas Labour can be independent of UKIP and have a fresh message.
Okay. If you succeed and you be elected, and we have a, if we have a Labour government, would you try and influence your government to support our Cypriot problem? The problem that we have, Turkey is still, occupied in Cyprus. And
Yes.
Would you do your best to promote our problem and make sure that we're going to have a good solution?
Yes. Jeremy Corbyn has said that he will appoint a peace negotiator for various problems in the world, and one of those is, of course, the peace process in Cyprus. And indeed, this person, Fabian Hamilton MP, has already been in Emily Thornberry's team, and he has already visited, together with a shadow member for Europe, has visited both parties on Cyprus and discussed with them how they feel things are going. Obviously, things have slowed down somewhat in the last 6 months, which I think is a disappointment, but that's no reason to give up. We still have a lot to fight for. We still have the younger generation coming through. Their expectation is that Cyprus is the one place and should be the one country, and yet it seems that we still have a number of hurdles to cross, not least land, not least the question of troops, not least the question of how the various localities would mesh together to form the one Cyprus. But regardless of the way that the parties within Cyprus deal with this problem, you know that the Labour Party is very keen to support the peace process in Cyprus. For a long time, Jeremy Corbyn has been involved in Cyprus. He's always been a friend of Cypriots here in North London. He's represented many Cypriot communities here in North London, and he would have a special peace envoy to deal with a number of peace issues internationally, not least Cyprus.
Local problems, you are standing for Ukraine as well. I mean, as far as I know, we have, quite a few problems facing, for example, just one main problem I have in mind, that because you visit very often the Greek Cypriot Community Centre, what's happening? I mean, why do council and why don't they help, to keep the community centre going? Because there is plenty of things happening. We're helping so many people there.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen? And are you supporting the idea of the council spending more money and keeping this place going? Or?
Well, I visited Susie Constantinidis and Chris last week in the Cypriot Centre, and I'm very keen to see the Cypriot Centre remain. Now, the local authority has had a lot of cuts from the Tory government. I say to the children in the schools when I go to visit that it's like your mother gives you £1 pocket money, and then the next day she says here's 30 pence. And that's what's happened to Haringey Council. The Tory government have cut back. For every pound that they used to get under the Labour government, they now get 30 pence under the Tories, or that's the projection for 2020. And due to the extremity of those cuts, there are a number of services which have been cut back. And one of those is the discretionary spend on community centres, which I think is a real backward step. And I go to many community centres who say similar things. Despite the wonderful luncheon club, despite the lovely afternoon teas that are available in the Cypriot Centre, it's very, very difficult for local authorities to carry on. However, I have recently raised this again with the council leader and the council chief exec to say, please find a way of continuing. And also I think within the community, we also must do some fundraising to keep the centre going and to maintain it as the beating heart of the community in Wood Green, because really Wood Green still is the home of Greek Cypriots. We know that St Barnabas Day is celebrated on the 11th of June in the church there locally. We have the big Easter service. We have a number of different events, and we must maintain Wood Green as the centre. So I will continue to make representations on behalf of the community, particularly our older people, and make sure that we can get as much funding as possible to keep the centre going.
So, I mean, you say to our audience there, they're going to, I'm sure they're going to vote for you and, make sure you're going to keep your promises. Are you involved in other, activities?
Yes. There are a number of other concerns that I have about Wood Green, for example. We have 10,000. We want 10,000 more police officers on the street because people say that they don't feel as safe as they could. We know that nationally, Mrs May, when she was the Home Secretary, took 19,000 police officers off the street. We also have a real lack of affordable housing, and that is something which is really affecting younger people who cannot afford to live in North London. We also have a problem of wages being very flat, and Labor will introduce by the end of the Parliament a £10 minimum wage, which will make a big difference to care workers, shop workers and people who work in hospitality, so that they can get a proper wage, because at the moment the government's had to step in to support many low-paid workers, whereas if there was a £10 minimum wage, the government would be actually saving money because it wouldn't have to step in with extra benefits.
No. Yes, its religion has an influence in your, political, activities.
I mean, I think obviously I attend all the various faith groups, and I think that the faith communities at the moment are very well positioned to help with what is a social crisis. You'd be aware about the food banks. There's a food bank which is run out of one of our local churches. The local mosque assists with meals and looking after people. The synagogue in Muswell Hill is also a very strong provider of social services, and I'm very pleased that we have that shield of protection. And also people of no faith. We have a wonderful approach as well of some people who want to help refugees, for example, and they want to assist. They themselves don't have faith, but they want to work together with the community to really provide that safety net for so many newly arrived communities. Just the other night I was with the group which is looking after refugees from Syria, and they're trying to find homes, shelter, assist with children into school, GP practices and so on. And I think that's really something which this government hasn't done as much as it could to assist. Many local authorities have put their hands up and said, we can do more. But unfortunately the government has been quite ungenerous in its attitude and has decided not to take as many child refugees as what it should be.
What is coming first? Is it your job as a politician or your family?
Well, one would have to say both, of course, because there's no choices there. I mean, obviously I have 2 children. One of them's 22 and just finishing his degree, so he's a little bit more self-sufficient. And then my daughter is 15 and still needs a lot of looking after and reminding about homework. And I have a very supportive partner who works in medicine, but he is also a very good cook.
So you don't have
washing up,
yes.
Washing, shopping. He's the perfect partner. So
Yeah,
I'm very, very
very
lucky.
actually, yes. Okay. Now, before we go, tell them why, in a few words,
Yes.
why they have to vote for you and not for the others.
I'd like to tell you why I want to be the Member of Parliament for Hornsey and Wood Green. Number one, it's Labour's role to stop a reckless Tory hard Brexit. And that's why I'm standing for the Labour Party here in Hornsey and Wood Green, to prevent the damage to our economy which a hard Brexit would do. We know that the people who would be most affected by an extreme Brexit brought on by the Tories are our people here in Hornsey and Wood Green. That's why I'm standing up against a hard Brexit by the Tories. Number two, the austerity which we've suffered at the hands of the Tories over the last 7 years. We're very keen to see an end to the austerity. The National Health Service is on its knees. Housing is in a desperate situation with more investment needed. And of course our schools, we're set to lose 655 teachers here in Haringey should the Tories get in again. So please think very carefully about casting your vote next Thursday. The polls open at 7 and close at 10 p.m. Vote for Labour for a fairer future, an end to austerity, and to prevent the desperate hard Brexit which the Tories would like to inflict on us. Thank you. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Catherine West, ευχαριστώ πολύ, and I wish you all the best.
Εντάξει, ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ. Thank you very, very much. Ευχαριστούμε και εσάς. Thank you for watching. Καλή νύχτα σας. Good night.